As we sit here right now, getting ready to record this episode, Batavia looks out her window from the second floor and she sees nothing but a sunflower head. The reality is it's going to be gone soon, and we need to figure out how to get our summer gardens ready for fall right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome to the Backyard Gardens podcast, where we talk about all things gardening and give the information out for you to be successful in your garden, whether it's your first or your last. We are your hosts, Ben, the backyard gardener, and
Batavia, the front yard gardener.
One in the country,
one in the city.
Now get ready as we dig deep into this wonderful world of gardening as we learn to grow and grow for change. Damn, you weren't lying. You really could see that sunflower. Right there from the top.
Yeah, I thought about you because I remember we were talking about a pain point for big sunflowers, or you have to stake them. And I was all like, I'm going to plant them near the fence. Staking will not be required. Those heads got so big and they're drooping. I'm like, all right. I got you. So thank you.
I have a confession to make right off the bat before we do anything. I can't grow a sunflower.
No, you can.
You know what? They all failed this year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's quite all right. We're in the process of redesigning our flower beds, so we'll see how that goes. But check out all of our links down below. T-shirts just for you. And I would tell you the coupon code for the T-shirts, but I can't remember. It's in a previous episode. I will interject it at some point during this episode, so stay tuned. But we have a listener question, and it goes directly in line with today's topic. You ready?
Yes, please.
You're sitting on the edge of your seat. Do you clean your garden out for fall?
Oh, that's a good one.
And everybody's got a different answer.
Yeah. So everyone has multiple answers, because my first answer is if I've let a garden bed get away from me. So as a whole, my garden, no. Do I kind of spot clean like I do in my side of my house? Yeah. So I think, is the person really asking, like, do you clear the space out completely, like with what's planted?
Yeah, I believe that's what is being asked.
Yeah, I do not.
So do you do anything like that, though?
The only thing I'd say is I will plan on pulling all of my potatoes out just because of what they are. I have beds dedicated to potatoes, so I do clean like that bed out.
Right.
Because my fall gardening overlaps my summer so much. I still have things growing that I want to leave in, so that's the reason why I don't clear the space. I kind of wish I had the you-know-what to do that. But I don't. I
don't know what you're talking about. Know what?
If I had the balls to do it. I mean, come on. We're 5 minutes into the episode. You have me using this kind of language?
Well, I was looking up the promotional code for everybody, too. I was multitasking. So the promotional code is Grow Food. Damn, I forgot again. Grow Food 21.
Okay.
So Grow Food 21. But I agree with you on the fact that I wish I had the cojones to go ahead and go through and just rip everything out and get to it. But the reality is you'd lose a lot of growing.
Yeah.
You would lose a lot of harvests if you did that. So,
well,
go
ahead.
No, go ahead. We have the same thought. I'm going to let you take it.
Yeah. So total food. Let's say we were talking about pounds of food to make it easy for my mind. You may come out about the same. And I know that a leafy green weighs less than a tomato, but let's just pretend that this is all equal. If you were to clear your garden out, you'd likely do it earlier. Sure, you'd still have vegetables that could be setting fruit if you were to do this, that you won't be able to let get to the point of harvest. But I think that it would lead to a better planned and planted fall garden. I'm going to try to make a note to really consider how much more many more vegetables I get off of these plants. Because at that point, when I'm thinking about summer to fall, a lot of my things are ripening. I'm not getting, there's not flowers on my pepper plant that are going to turn into full-fledged peppers between, September and my first frost. That's not going to happen.
But you hope there is.
Yeah, that's the garden fool that I am.
Let's be realistic. Yeah, we're all garden fools. We're garden idiots. We're like, oh yeah, it's going to happen. That flower, I got a flower. It's going to happen. It's not going to take long either. I'm going to get it. Everybody's whispering.
It's not, I don't think it's that. I don't think anyone's looking at, well, maybe some. We're not looking at the individual flowers and saying, I think we're looking and saying this plant is still producing. So the sign of that, the plant's healthy. You do have flowers on it. You have peppers, using peppers as an example. You have peppers on it. So you're like, this thing is still producing. If you were to strip everything off of that plant, maybe you have a shot. Again, we're talking about from when this airs to like my first frost. I got another 2 months, but 2 months of not hot summer weather either. So all of that folds in for me.
So what you're talking about is less than ideal conditions.
Come on with it. Yeah.
I felt, when I said that, it felt good coming out too. But that's what it is. So like in my area, it's the opposite. It's the less than ideal conditions for the fall food. So, the purpose of me ripping everything out, it wouldn't really help because it's too hot for this other stuff. So it could very easily just go straight to bolt.
Yeah.
Which happened to me last year.
Yeah.
So, that's a good, solid question. And I could see somebody really wrestling with that. Now, I think this year, I want to say this, I don't want to say it on air. I think this year, as the summer comes down to an end, you may witness me do more of a massive clean out and a big planting, maybe. We'll see, There comes a point for us where we're like, I'm not going to hold that tomato plant in there just to get 3 more tomatoes.
Did the listeners, is it okay to say their listener's name?
I don't have their name.
Okay. Because as we think about this, I think having at least one successful season of spring gardening under my belt this spring, having a successful season of fall gardening last year, like I think I've bought into this 3-season gardening. Like maybe it will work for me. Last year
Leonard
I kind of
got that boy. Leonard's like, yeah.
I kind of maybe have stumbled into it last year where I had a couple of garden beds that had not been planted in. And so in my mind, I'm kind of thinking like, I literally said to myself, when I win the lottery, when I quit my day job, when this is what my life is, I can really see these beds are geared towards summer plantings. These beds are geared towards fall plantings. So there's not, there's 16 beds now in the front and backyard. All of them would not be planted right at this moment. It's what can you manage, right? Giving the soil a itty bitty rest. Like there's some logic that I haven't figured out because I'm shaking the entire desk here. These powerful
I thought you were having
thighs.
an earthquake, but I wasn't really gonna say anything.
Anyway, it's a long way around. There could be something to that question that makes me rethink the approach I'm taking, but I'm still probably a couple of years off of it. I'm going to be real honest. There are 2 things that also are in my mind. I had a bowl of collard greens and cornbread before this recording, which is not a good idea.
Just so you know, hold on.
You can see it in my face.
Just so you know, we did not record this during the challenge, so
duly noted.
It is okay.
Yeah, so we're at the end of July.
We're getting real close to it, though, so she's enjoying that cornbread now.
Well, this could be a breakfast, and we could be recording early in the morning, but we're not. So I'm feeling real heavy. All of that pot liquor is sitting on my stomach. So I don't know how clever or helpful I'm going to be. And that could be the reason why. I'm also thinking about garden fatigue, right? So the reality is I don't know if I really have it in me to clear my entire garden space again.
Well, let me go ahead and say this, and I answered this in another way, in another question. To me, it seemed like it was a profound statement, but it may not be. When I started fall gardening, I cared less about diseases and pests late in the summer because it was more of an opportunity for me to clear space for something else to go into the ground at that time. So like right now I have a husk tomato that is struggling. We got a bunch of rain and it looks like it's hurting. And I'm really debating like, you know what, just pull it out. You know what I mean? Just get rid of it because then you just free up that space and I could throw some chard in. I can throw some collards in right about now. You know, we're starting to get to that right to the beginning edge of where I could plant that stuff. So that's just something that I've kind of thought about too, is like, instead of like dousing it with chemicals and like stressing, like just pull it up and get something else in that space if I have to, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, it's a state of mind for me. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
Okay.
I mean, we also know you're the king of pull it, you know, so.
Yeah. There comes times when I'm the king of pull it, you know? And I think the reason why is because I have so much of a grace period of planning stuff too. Yeah. You know, I'm not like you where some stuff is, if it doesn't go in now, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, positive peer pressure, you are wearing on me.
Am I?
So I think I pulled like all of my white cabbage last year, and it's absolutely through your influence. And this year I'm looking at, I think 2 tomato plants, one for sure. I have a paste tomato, one of 3 plants, and I'm kind of like, like, I mean, you just have a top hat on now. I've trimmed all these other leaves off, you know, like.
It just gets to a point where you're like, whatever. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And by the time this airs, you know, there may be some slow singing and flower bringing for that tomato plant, but, yeah, all right. But that's not clearing. This person is talking about, you know, my front yard garden.
Boom, cleared out, empty.
Yep. And that's not in my plan.
You know, the only way I think I could do it, I think if I added more beds in, then I could definitely do a heavier rotation. But I would definitely plant something quick in the summertime in there too, though.
Yeah, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's a hard thing. Yeah. And I mean, you got to think about, I don't even want to think about more beds. I can't afford the wood right now, so.
Who you telling? You know, that last bed I made was based on old landscape timbers I had. Like, this is going to work.
Yeah. We'll see. And that's one thing I want to say too, is wood prices have gone down, and they've gone down because people like you and me and all the listeners that said, I ain't buying this shit. I ain't paying for it. And it drove the prices down. So, you know, good job. Good job, everybody. The consumer spoke out, and that's how it should be. So
way to cut your own trees and create your own. No, that's not what happened. But yeah,
no,
good job.
We just went without. You know, but so yeah. But look, this question dovetails directly into our episode. So thank you for your question. We're gonna take a break, and then when we come back, we're just gonna continue the conversation. And just in case you missed it, that coupon code is GROWFOOD21 for the t-shirts. A lot of y'all asked, how can you help support the Backyard Gardens podcast? Well, we have been busy and we have created a t-shirt line just for the gardener.
To visit our shop, go to the link in the show notes and check out the t-shirts and other goodies we have.
Now, these are super special t-shirts designed just for the gardener, so enjoy. Thank you for supporting the Backyard Gardens podcast, and we'll see you guys after the harvest. Well, we got that out of the way. If you want to prepare your summer garden for your fall garden, maybe you shouldn't rip everything out, or maybe you should. That's a polarizing question, I believe. What do you think? Is that the correct word to use?
No, but it's okay.
Damn. I thought I had it right for once.
I think your garden space really, so garden space, what you're growing now for summer, what you plan on growing for fall. I think those are the pieces that determine if it's a good idea or not. If I had a single garden bed, so in my very first garden, it would have been, I always get the measurements wrong, but 4 by like 30 feet. Like that was the entire like length of the fence. And if back then I was planting a fall garden, you know, I mean, going back.
You wouldn't have planted a fall garden back then, though.
Well, but we're pretending. So if I were to plant things for fall.
I hate playing pretend.
Yeah, I think I was going to say I would have cleared everything, but I wouldn't have. So let's fast forward. Let's say that I only have that space today, 4 by 30, right? So I'm limited in what I'm growing. Would I then say around August, around the time this is airing, I'm going to pull all of my summer things out and then plant things for fall? I don't know. I don't know myself that well because, I mean, on one hand, how do you get fall vegetables without doing that?
I know what you would do.
Okay, tell me.
You wouldn't. Or you would add pots if you really wanted to. You wouldn't pull anything out.
That's not a part of the rule. Oh, you want to hear something great?
We're pretending, right?
Yeah. Well,
I'm pretending too.
So you want to hear this person that believes she knows herself but clearly doesn't? So the collard greens that I had in July, which were supposed to be for breakfast, but I ended up getting a late start. They were 2 of the plants that I grew in containers earlier this spring. It was a part of an experiment, yada, yada, yada. The experiment didn't go well. The greens had been eaten up. And so my plan was to cut all the leaves off, cook them up, and then pull the plants out. So I cut all the leaves up and because I didn't cut like the entire center, I just couldn't, right? So I took those 2 plants and put them inside of 2-gallon buckets, 1 in each bucket. Put some soil around it. Like, I bet this thing is going to still grow because I want to use the containers they were in for my fall planting. Yeah, so that is a step that I do for fall, right? You know, things like preparing my containers that I had spring or summer things in and saying, okay, let me get ready to plant fall things. Prepping the soil and all of that stuff. So, and
see, that just says everything that I said to start off with. Yep. That's how you're going to do it. So you would just find a way to add more, which is acceptable, I think. And, you know, I know when I started gardening, I'm trying to think back. I think I did try to do a fall planting of like maybe lettuce or something like that. But, you know, honestly, by the time summer gets over, there's a lot of empty space in my gardens. There's a lot of stuff that's just been diseased and stuff like that, which is where I was going to, well, that's not where to start. But the important place to start with all of this is knowing when you really start to get a cool down.
Excuse me.
Bless you. If you're in public, you'd be better off if you farted.
Yeah, right. He does. And I muted the wrong microphone thinking that it wouldn't be in the recording. So
that's okay. You're allowed to sneeze on this show. But I think that's a big part of it, you know.
What and where?
What now?
What you're planting, which we covered in, you know, introducing fall planting. You know, when we were planning our fall garden back in July. But where is going to be the biggest question. And one of the biggest challenges I have behind, I guess, maybe like the time I have to grow it in. So where are you going to plant them, right?
Well, see, and that's the whole thing is, you know, like when does it start to cool down for you? Start to cool down?
September.
There you go. So by September, you should have things in the ground that are getting close to, they're probably about halfway to their finishing point. You know what I mean? So that's something that to kind of think about is, and you got to realize too, and we say this all the time, and I'm going to continue to say it, and I don't care if you're tired of hearing it, the sun's lower in the sky, so you're getting less sun. So you need to add and factor in more time. Yeah. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, because I do listen back to this, perhaps a step that this is what I want to do. I just don't know if I have the discipline to do it. So everything that I grow, I don't love in my garden. I don't realize it until I grow it that I don't love it. Right. You know, so we talk a lot about things that are diseased or things that are poor performing that we pull. Right. Yeah. Or that you browbeat me into pulling. But what about things we just don't like? Again, we're talking about what you're planting and where you're planting it. So if you need to clear space, going back to the question at the top, you know, let's think about some of the vegetables that we just weren't crazy about. Wasn't the best pepper in the world, right? You know, is it the National cucumbers that you weren't crazy about?
National pickling cucumber, yeah.
You know, so again, you're pulling something, making space to grow some more food. You're not just clearing the space out, right? So you do gain something from it. That's something that I hope to be able to do. I mean, obviously, I hope I love everything I grow, but the reality is that's not going to be the case.
Yeah.
I remember last year as I looked for some of my like melons and some of the summer melons, like I had a whole plant that was just one single melon. You know, there's so much skin in the game, it's impossible for you to walk away from that one melon, you know, but are you looking closely at the vines? What about the melon that's taken up the entire trellis where there's nothing there? Which actually is a great point, because what I was able to do last year, you can pull the plant if you're doing vertical gardening or trellising, you can pull the plant out of the soil. And if the vines are still there, they're there, especially if you're not growing something that's going to climb, right? Yeah. So all you need really is the soil to grow that thing in.
Well, you need space around it for it to get air and sun, but yeah, you're right. You can just leave it there, because a lot of times the vines will intertwine around other things too, which can make it dangerous to pull.
Exactly.
But you know, and I agree, and you kind of hinted on it, but the next step I think would be to go through and really pull dead stuff and, you know, disease and sick and, you know, anything that's just, I mean, you know, it's like I've got a zucchini plant right now. The little bastard wiped out 90% of my zucchini. I have one plant left, and it's been on death's door for months. And I've just been like, you know what? I'm going to try and bring it back. And I have, so my whole plan for this section is, and this is kind of a story to put you into my mindset, is in the fall, I'm putting my Brussels sprouts here. So when my Brussels sprouts need to go in is around August. So if that doesn't come back by then I can pull it. But there's no point in me putting anything in its place right now, because it won't get to fruition before I can get in everything else, because it was so late in the year. So now that we know that, now you can start to see where my mind is when I'm out in my garden. I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, it's kind of bare, but there's a solid plan in place. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to stick to that plan, damn it, because I spent a lot of time making my fall garden plan, and I'm not going to screw it up. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. So I still have it. It's and you know what? It seems to be coming back, and it may actually get to the point where I don't want to pull it.
Yeah, so I was counting. I think it's 8 squash plants, summer squash plants that I have in raised beds and in containers. And so far as of this recording, I see squash vine borer damage in 2 of them. Yeah. 2 that I haven't gotten fruit off of yet, vegetables off of yet. And you know how I'm rolling with this. Yeah. So just as an update there, I think, though, I want to drill in just a bit further. You absolutely do want to make sure that diseased versus damaged, tattered leaves are very different, but you want to make sure that you aren't adding new plantings to your garden space and they're surrounded by some diseased plant. You know, so sometimes we'll let, if you're ending the garden season, you may let something just continue, you know, die its natural death, right? You know, you only have weeks or maybe a month left. You may not intervene, but when you're inserting some new healthy seedling, maybe a transplant that's going to be young and kind of vulnerable, or you're dropping some new seeds in there, you still want it to be in the most healthy environment, right?
Right. So. No, and I think that's a solid point, because if you add it to that, I mean, you're just going to be chasing that dragon the whole way. You know, you're going to be constantly trying to, you know, treat it, and you don't want to do that. Yeah. So, and give yourself some time in between too. So if you know you're going to be planting there and you know you have this plant that's sick, pull it out a week beforehand and just let it get, you know, let the sun disinfects and, you know, let water it and take care of it, and just, you know, and if you treat stuff like, you know, if you're doing like a neem oil treatment or anything like that, I would do a treatment beforehand too. So you can kind of, everything is just nice and happy. You don't want to put anything in a bad position, you know?
Yeah. And I think we just have to understand what potential bad positions are in, because if I pull a plant, I'm kind of thinking like, oh, the plant's gone, the issue's gone. Depending on what plant you're pulling and what plant you're planting, maybe not, you know, so.
Well, you know, it's like I had flea beetles on my eggplants, and then 2 weeks later, those flea beetles are on my tomatoes in the next bed over. They went over there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not rocket science. Like they definitely like left and went over there. So you're going to have that. So they travel, it's like a friend of mine, I was telling him I was going fishing. I was like, man, the fish aren't ever there. And he's like, man, fish have tails. What's wrong with you? They swim. I'm like, okay. So it's same idea. So you want to give everything a good treatment, and I think designing the way you plant your beds from the get-go, being very thoughtful about how and when things are done growing and what you can get rid of and what you can't and what are more susceptible to other things really sets you up into the right place.
Yeah, I think that's the most ideal, though, because a lot of what I learned is through trial and error. Right. So sometimes I have to stumble upon something and realize, oh, that didn't really work that way. And again, to be honest, really, really honest, I like to be able to take the liberty of saying, I don't know what exactly is going in that bed. I'm going to decide now. Right.
Yeah.
It does give me a little bit of anxiety coming into it. Like I still feel like, for fall, I'm still kind of winging it, and I'm okay with that for now. It gives me a tinge bit of anxiety because I just feel like I am, maybe the term is, the time is precious and I don't want to feel like I'm squandering it.
Yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is if you got something to grow and you ain't squandering shit, you know what I mean? You have that opportunity the whole time.
Well, the reality is, if I go back to the days of only having a summer garden and I let my summer garden go through until that frost comes about, I'm going to make the argument for, again, I'm in some cases still getting food, like real food out of the garden. Now, if we go back to that whole question of, are you getting new peppers and new tomatoes or not? There's that.
Right.
For fall, we're just saying we have an opportunity to get some different types of food, right?
Yeah.
Maybe some food that will last further into the fall and winter season than maybe some of those summer crops. Like once you pull them off of the plant, once you're storing and preserving and so on. So variety, diversity.
Think about it like this too. When you plant and when you get your first frost, it's not like you get your first frost and it's like every day it's cold and every day, it takes a while. You still have some warm days in there. So, correct me if I'm wrong. You do have warm days after you get a frost,
I do have some
right?
warm days in there, and it's an excellent point because some of the vegetables that I'll plant for fall are more
frost tolerant,
more likely to survive that super cold or
frost
just
tolerant.
Cold and then getting warmer again. Versus we know if we get a frost or freeze, that summer tomato plant is done, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely crops that are more frost tolerant, and that's good. So you can grow them when it's hot, but as they start getting bigger and bigger,
as they start to get bigger and bigger, they can take the cooler and they need the cooler weather. So that's something to really know what you're planting. It goes back to know what you're going to plant. And so my sweet potatoes, for instance, like I know I'm going to pull them out of the ground somewhere between September 1st and October 15th. I know it's a big difference, but so in that timeline, I know that like, hey, I have this area that I can plant, and I know that I still have a couple weeks before my first frost. I know that I'm still going to have some warm days. So how can I use that bed to my advantage? Now the benefit of pulling up the sweet potatoes is the whole damn thing's going to get turned over. Yeah.
So I'll be putting, like, for instance, like I plan to put radishes, carrots, and probably lettuce in there. Or I did collards last year, I believe. So I think actually kale will be the second choice. And then those are all quick growing. The carrots aren't quick growing, but the goal is if it's not too cold, they will sprout and they will continue to grow. And then I'll have an early spring crop of carrots. So
because in part, you're based on how cold your temps get, or that your temps don't stay freezing for 15, 20, 30 days.
Right.
I was just thinking about the vegetables when you mentioned your sweet potatoes, the vegetables that will stay in my garden through fall, basically until that first frost. So things like my sweet potatoes, just to try to get to the full number of days, 100 plus days, I'm going to leave them in there and probably pull them up just before the frost. So that bed would not be used for fall plantings. You know, I have an opportunity to prepare, the cage baby, which has tomatoes. If I'm so bold, right, that's an opportunity to plant fall things. The 2 large beds in the front yard that have melons and cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers, that's an opportunity for me to prep that bed for fall. Again, transitioning from summer to fall. That's probably going to mean some interplanting, as you always like to describe, like planting something under something else. Places where I may have flowers that are large and like annuals that are large enough, it's a large enough space or a container. If they've petered out, that's an opportunity to kind of get ready to transition, whether it's preparing for fall vegetables or fall flowers even, because there's always that.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like you're kind of doing the same thing I am, as you're like looking around and you're saying, okay, here's a place where I can put something, here's a place.
Tuck something in,
you know, and you're going to start tucking stuff in and eventually it'll grow more and more. So for instance, this week I went through and I pulled up my, one section of my bush beans were done. So I pulled them up and I put rutabagas in. I just direct sowed them right there. Boom, done. I had some pumpkins that got ravished, unfortunately, by the squash vine borer, which, funny enough, when I read, said they would not be bothered by them. But you know what? You live and learn.
You should stop reading.
I really should. I put more rutabagas there because they are a long season crop. I have some more bush beans that I'm like, I'm kind of all set on, like we've discussed earlier, and I'm going to say right now, I'm all set on dragon tongue beans. I'm not growing those anymore.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they don't look like they're supposed to. Oh. They're not prolific.
How did David feel about them?
He doesn't give a shit. You know what I mean? He was like, Daddy, this doesn't look like the picture. And I was like, I know. And he was like, we got robbed.
Yeah.
I was like, we didn't get robbed, but.
Wait, he said that?
Yeah, you say we got robbed. And I was like, we didn't get robbed, but So I'm going to pull those up and I'm going to put carrots in their place. So, I'm doing the same thing. I'm tucking and I'm starting in these different sections. And it's just, it's tricky, but as you get them going, like the hardest part is getting that first step. But then once I get those going and they're sprouting and you can see them, and then you can move around and you can do other things. And, it starts to get a lot easier to do. Yeah,
because there's nothing sadder for me than when that summer stuff starts to die its natural death, starts, to look peaked, and you don't have anything else around it. It's just for me.
You got like the one tomato plant out there and it's like, and you're like, oh, yeah. And the thing is too, is you can and I think, honestly, if you planted a fall garden and you did it correctly, and I don't know what correctly is, well, I do. If you had like a full-blown, like prolific garden that was very lush and happy as the season cooled, I feel very confident saying that our slight depression that we all get when the growing season's coming to an end would be very minimal because you already have something in its place growing.
Yep.
So I think that could be something too, but what do I know?
And this may be understood, but I'll say it anyway. And we use the term fall garden a lot. And we're really just talking about fall gardening, like growing fall vegetables that typically, enjoy the fall temperatures. Because the reality is, you could be someone that practices fall gardening and only have one or two things that you planted for fall. It doesn't have to be your entire garden space. It doesn't have to be an entire garden bed. That's why when I was trying to think back, like, did I accidentally plant some fall things? And maybe or maybe not. But lettuce is a great example of that, right? So we've talked about how you miss some of the things you couldn't grow in the summer and you have a chance to grow them in the fall. not only is it a makeup for what did or didn't happen this past spring, it's a trial run for next spring as well. So I think for me, I really just want to be able to produce food for as long as I can. And I want to be out in the garden for as long as I can. So
yeah, and the good thing about it too is the time of year, like let's say that you do like I do when we practice seasonal eating. Mm-hmm. You can still get those things, and I know they're not as good, but you can still get those things from the grocery store and stuff that are grown locally. You can go to farm stands and still get your tomatoes and stuff like that fairly long into the year. Yeah. I mean, a lot longer than you probably, because, they're set up for it. Those people, they have more open spaces and blah, blah, blah. So it's definitely something to think about. And I think that having a fall garden, like if I did it correctly, I would pull everything out and do it. And I think it would make me happier. But I think there would be so much downtime. It would drive me crazy.
Well, I think for you, let's focus on you and your space and your area.
I don't want to be focused on.
No, it's okay. You'll be all right.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
Just based on how long you can grow into the later months, your November and December. I was thinking about like how many tomatoes you really need for a season, how many peppers you really need for a season. And this is for all y'all that are listening. I mean, I guess if you can hear me, you're listening. This is kind of a pep talk for myself, like how much is enough, right? Like,
right.
When you were talking about the guy that was like, your greenhouse and he wanted to grow tomatoes, and you said something like, you've been giving away tomatoes all summer. Like, you really don't want to grow more tomatoes. Yeah. So it's that, right? The one thing that I miss the most that I really haven't been able to master growing, which it's outside of season. So that's why it's lettuce. So one of the big things I look forward to growing in the fall is, it sounds cliche, I know. Oh, you're eating rabbit food, you have a garden. I really enjoy, leafy greens and lettuce greens, right? Yeah. And I just really, although I have some summer heat tolerant, it's like you can eat lettuce once every 3 weeks or something. And that's not the same. And it's only 2 or 3 months, but it's 2 or 3 months. But anyway, so when you talk about like what you're trying to grow in the fall, and it kind of feels like it just comes down to you making some decisions, sometimes some tough decisions about your space. You know, how much do you want it for the fall? Right.
And my phone started ringing, threw me off. That's the big thing too, is, how much do you want? Mm-hmm. You don't fill up your whole garden bed, do you? All of your gardens?
Every year?
Or let me rephrase that. This fall, are you planning to fill in all your gardens?
Not with fall plantings, no.
Okay. Yeah. So, but you're planning on filling up a portion of them.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And what you do fill up, I'm sure you're going to pack in there as much as you can. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I do the same thing. And I plan on filling all of mine out, but a lot of my filling is going to be like quick growing, like radishes. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be seed, grow, harvest, done. Like, I don't plan on pushing anything to limits in some sections because they don't get as much sun in the winter.
Yeah.
So last year I just had, I had stuff in the ground, but it looked like crap all winter. Mm-hmm, it was like I was treating it for bugs and stuff constantly. And then finally it started to grow. But by the time it grew, it was so much work. Mm-hmm. And I had a $400 rutabaga at one point, it didn't even get to eat it because I was spraying so much because they kept getting ravished. So, and that's the thing too, is I don't think you need to completely fill out your garden, but I definitely feel like if you're going to do it, you should probably pack in what areas you are and fill them out and, have fun design them. Yeah. Because it's a totally different look for a garden.
So we've entered the garden mental health portion of the show. And that's
a dangerous space.
It's a new section of the show. Or it's going back to all of the garden therapy, that I used to receive. Yeah. It's also okay if you decide against planting some things in the fall. Like, my fear is always garden burnout, right? So when you mentioned, all of the work you were doing, trying to keep that thing healthy, spraying and intervening and all, you don't want, no pun intended, to leave a bad taste in your mouth, right? You know, potentially successful spring, successful summer, and here you forcing the envelope, I guess is what I'm trying to get to, or pushing the envelope. It's pushing. That's the saying, right?
Pushing the envelope, yeah.
Yeah. Are you doing either or both of those? So it's the moment of, I was looking at my sunflowers and saying I would really love to start some more sunflowers and plant to have another round of sunflowers. Then I was walking through the timing and saying it's taken 2 months from the time they were planted, which they were not even a foot tall, to start forming heads. And that's 2 months coming from the cooler weather going into what we would consider hot weather here. I basically have another 2 months before I'm going to be, getting a frost. The reality is, sun being lower, cooler temps, those sunflowers aren't going to get, not the 10 or 10 feet ones, they're not going to get to their full potential, right?
No.
So let it go.
But what does it hurt to try? You know what I mean? And that's,
I think there's something to that, though. I think, I could try it, but it is space. It's, another seed that I'm using. Let's think about using that space for something that has a better chance.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you clock it in as a failure, though, if you do it and it doesn't grow. I think, in your head, you'd be like, I failed.
Yeah. If it's just 6 in one hand and half a dozen in another. If I do it, then I realize, I'll have 2 kind of growing points for sunflowers. And the reality is that could work, but not when you're at the end of July saying, let me do this. You know what I'm saying?
I was joking when I said that I can't grow sunflowers. And I go back because that statement made me think about it. And the whole thing was when I planted out in the spring, we didn't get a drop of rain. And from May 1st to May 31st. And that's like crucial timing in the spring. Yeah. I remember it was so dry and a lot of things. And I don't have enough. I can't water everything. Some things just need to just grow on their own. And that's why. But, I clocked that in my head as a failure, even though I'm like, oh, wait, we had a drought. You know what I mean? Yeah. You don't get rain for a month, really? That's not good. So that's kind of part of it too. Yeah. So, and the other thing that I was thinking is like, if you're like me and you're direct sowing your seeds, you got to keep them wet. Especially right now, it's hot. You know what I mean? So
you got to keep them wet, but also consider, and depending on where you are, if you are in a very wet climate, you could be potentially harming the other things that are planted. Yeah. So
that's exactly right.
It's absolutely possible, but you got to be careful there.
Yeah. Like my rutabaga seeds, like I can't water the whole bed every day. So I've got to go out there and hand water that portion of it every day. I give it a little sprinkle. Yeah. And that makes a big difference. So that's just something to keep in mind, and as you get closer and closer to the end of the year, you're going to have to adjust your watering based on the temperature and the sun and all that stuff. So
here's a secret. When I plant some things in the...
You're not supposed to tell secrets.
Oh, no. That's okay.
Okay.
We can tell this one. When I plant something, and it's a real secret too, when I plant some things like in preparation for the fall, I kind of hedge my bet. Like, and one part of me is like, oh, I really want this to grow up in the fall. And another part's it's like, oh, if not, it'll overwinter. Everything doesn't overwinter, but it'll overwinter. And guess what I'll find in the spring? Because it's just still growing food, but just at a different time than I originally planned for.
And does that work for you?
It does, because it's such a pleasant surprise in the spring, And
well, what I mean is, do you have things come up that you didn't think? And if you do, what are they?
Spinach, kale, some flowers, and some SOME flowers. So this isn't just like your volunteer situation. This is something that Mustards did this for me this year, that I intentionally planted that didn't produce until at some point many months later. Right. So yeah, those are a few things that's worked out for me.
Yeah, that's I've thought about that a few times, and I've never really had any luck with that. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's because I'm messing with the soil too much and things are getting buried deeper, or what it is, but I don't really have that benefit. One thing I can say you can do is take a handful of peat moss and wet it and put that on top of the seed.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so it doesn't get, if it does get dry, it doesn't get encrusted over, and the seed can still pop out.
Yeah. Because
and it'll
depending
stay
on some seeds
moist
rot,
longer.
and that's what you're trying to prevent there. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're trying to have it rot, but you're also giving it an opportunity to easily come up, and that peat moss really holds water a lot better than your soil will. So, yeah. And I did that over the spring where I threw some flowers out, and then I would just come back and just sprinkle peat moss. I didn't even put any effort into it. And sure enough, wherever the peat moss landed is where they would grow.
Yeah.
So that made a big difference.
So another thing when it comes to what you have in summer and kind of gearing towards getting it ready for fall, this is a prime time for preserving, right? So while we love to see their tomatoes on the plant, peppers on the plant, all of these things still on the plant, pull some of that stuff off of the plant so you can get it preserved, if not eaten fresh.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, if you're going to have the plant and leave it out there, you need to be harvesting as often as possible to keep it productive. That's a big part of what you're doing. So, pay attention to that. And I mean, you're exactly right. And that's actually typically my busiest time of year is August and September, maybe into October. I can be doing a lot of canning, so, and also curing. Canning, freezing, and curing. I'm always drying something. I'm always drying herbs or something like that.
Yeah, it's a big time for processing things that came out of the garden.
Processing, yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And that's where, for me, that's where the biggest bang comes in for your buck. You know what I mean? That's where you sit back and you look and you're like, damn,
yeah, man,
we did something. So that's a big deal.
So just a quick note, depending on what I was growing there before, like for summer, and what I'm planning on planting for fall, I may add some compost in when I plant for fall, especially if it's like a half a bed worth or a full bed that I'm planting in. Things that I had that were heavy feeders, there is a little bit of acknowledgement when it comes to rotating crops for this, just a little bit. You guys know kind of my, general, is it really hoo-hoo? Yeah. Or is it woo-woo? Which one do you say?
Woo-woo.
Yeah. So there is a little bit of that consideration for me in my space. If I have enough clear space, generally I'm adding compost. And I think we came to the conclusion that may have just played in my favor over the years.
Yeah. So my big task for the week, you want to know what my big task is?
Yes, please.
I'm going to the wild garden. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to weed it good. I'm going to get all the weeds up. I'm going to reconstruct it. So I have 2 separate beds with like a 1, maybe 2 foot path down the middle, and I'm going to combine it in the one bed and make it a traditional row garden.
Oh, okay.
That's what I want to do. But so I'm weeding it. I'm going to pull up the wood, make it that, and then I'm going to come back in. And I've been making compost all year. I'm going to take half of my compost that I've been building all year, and I'm going to put it out there as thick as I can and as deep as I can, and what's out there growing, because things just don't grow well out there. And I know it's just I got to keep working the soil, So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to pull up all of the dragon tongue beans that are there because they suck, and I'm going to put my carrots there, and then I'm going to harvest what carrots I've had growing there for almost a year that just are just stagnant, because that's where I'm going to be putting Brussels sprouts in the next, month maybe. So I'm going to start getting that ready. And if they're not growing, I'm just going to get it out of there. You know what I mean? Let that soil rest for a little bit and give it a good fertilization before I put that. I'm going to give it a real heavy fertilizing, dusting before I put that compost on top.
Okay.
So, and I'm going to put it right on top of that straw mulch that I have out there. That's my plan.
So just to know, one of our least favorite, I think Mrs. Gardner is the only person that enjoys this in the world. If you've been neglectful, this is a good time to, in preparation for one season to another, go through and weed the garden.
Yeah.
Weed the garden space. There's a spot on the side of my garage that's like all kinds of like dirt and wood chips and, kind of little bitty rocks and pea gravel and all kinds of crap, right? And there's enough soil that's exposed to the sun where these weeds will grow up. And in part, I leave them for a while because it's pretty clear the stray cats don't really like to, muck with that area. But it also is a space for weed seeds to form if I leave the weeds there long enough. And then it also is a space for kind of other bugs and things, to kind of fester, right?
Yep.
So I did that this week. It wasn't a part of my garden walk. It wasn't on my garden list. I just looked at it and said, it's time. So it's a good practice, kind of going back to the competing resources, especially if they're in your garden bed. You don't want the last of your summer vegetables to be competing for resources in that soil, competing with the weeds. And you don't want what you're putting in there to be competing with the weeds either.
Exactly. And I mean, that's the whole thing too I don't know about you. Like, how do you weed your garden? Do you do it all at once? Do you do it piece by piece?
I generally will spend an hour at the most, and it's basically get through whatever I can get through in that hour. So
a day, a week, a month, a year.
I'll be frank. I get the question, does mulch really help? And it does. There's some garden beds that don't have mulch on it of any kind, but those garden beds have really big vegetables in them that are covering the soil. A lot of my weeding now is like outside of the garden beds, so it's along walkways, right? It's between cracks, and I generally kind of spot weed, if you will,
That's what vinegar is for.
Oh, that's just not the way I roll. I get it. Like,
that's just easy.
It seems like a waste to me when I could just pull
of good vinegar.
Of good vinegar.
Well, hey, if you love vinegar that much, go for it.
Of good vinegar.
I do mine in batches. So, I mean, as I'm out there working, and because I use the mulch as well, I don't have as many. And so, like, if I'm out there and I'm picking, I'll pick a couple things. But then, like, I'll go out to the wild garden, and I know, and it's, it's the paths. It's honestly the paths out there that need it. And I'll go and I'll do a solid weeding. And I also need to reconstruct my strawberry bed.
I'm not ready to talk about strawberry beds.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. So, that's fall. Transitioning from summer to fall can be tricky. And I urge everybody to kind of give it a shot and see what you can do, see what you want to do, honestly. And I mean, think about what you want to do and give it a go. If it's starting to get cool in where you are, get some seedlings,
Yeah.
Starting seeds. We've talked about starting seeds earlier on. So I think it's worth a shot. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely check out your garden centers. A lot of mine are kind of on their last leg now. But poke your head around and see if they have still some healthy things that are more suited for fall. And I think at this point, think about all the money you've saved with the other means that you've used to plant your garden. It's okay to spend a couple of dollars on something for the fall if you think it's going to produce something you want. Especially at this point where, in the higher zones, you still have time to start fall-like things from seed. When it comes to like your zone bin and under, so you're 8 and lower, we're really at the point where you're not starting a lot like your brassicas from seed. Like that's pretty much done, and that's okay.
I've had mine going for a month. So, and they're slow, by the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I say if you're going to start your fall garden for the first time this year, I would just buy transplants personally and just give it a shot. It's one less thing you got to worry about.
The only thing I would probably say would be, to be quite frank, lettuce. It's so cheap. There's so many seeds. Generally, it's a faster growing, not every single lettuce, but a lot of lettuces. Leafy lettuces especially are faster growing. You can scatter those seeds, and if nothing comes up, nothing comes up. But because I've seen lettuce seedlings or transplants, and it really hurts my heart that people purchase those.
Yeah. Well, and the one benefit of those is you go to buy them, you buy a 6-pack and you end up with 12 or 14 of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're double or triple in the pot. So think about that too. That's for us cheap folk out there.
True.
But it is time for the recipe of the day.
Oh, okay.
I have been tasked with giving the recipe of the day, and I'm not convinced that it's my recipe, but it's okay. I'm going to give you my special invention that I may have given before, but I don't know. If I haven't, then you get it, and if you have, to go eat it again. So what I'm going to do is we're going to make a sandwich.
Wait,
and we're going to take
in the middle of our challenge, we're making sandwiches?
Yep, we're going to make a sandwich,
okay.
yeah.
For breakfast or for dinner to be consumed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're only doing for lunch. Don't forget. So we're going to get a piece of bread, 2 pieces of bread, and you're going to get some hummus. And you're going to smear the hummus on there. Mm-hmm. Have I given this out?
No, go ahead.
Okay, you're smiling, so.
I'll tell you why.
I use everything bagel, everything hummus, but use whatever flavor you want. And then I slice a cucumber, nice and thin. I slice a jalapeno, and I put all of that into the toaster oven under broil. And I broil it until it gets a nice brown sheen on it. And then I go pull it out, put some salt and some pepper on it. And then I add spinach on top, close it up. And then you've got a nice, simple, filling meal. You can also add onions if you want, but every vegetable that is on there is easy to grow. And a lot of people grow in their gardens, so it is definitely a fresh food. And that's it. I mean, it's so easy. What are you doing over there?
So 24 hours ago, I had a text conversation with a buddy, and I brought up hummus, and the reply was, "I hate hummus. It's guacamole for assholes."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One, it's not. I get the idea of maybe not enjoying hummus because I'm a bean lover.
I get tired of hummus, and, we stated this on the backyard kitchen, which is why we don't eat a lot of it. And this is really the only way that I will eat hummus. I just got tired of it because I was, eat your hummus. You're a vegan, eat your hummus. I'm like, damn. I didn't know when I was a vegan I had to be a hummusitarian. So, but this was one thing that we did make that I still eat to this day, and it's very good. But the key is broiling it. You've got to broil it, and you've got to put salt and pepper on it.
For it to have that charred taste?
It just gives it a little bit of a crisp. It warms it up a little bit. It just makes a difference, and it's not as goopy. It kind of dries up the chickpeas, the hummus a little bit and all that. So,
okay.
As you guys know, I eat simple. We eat simple recipes, fast, easy, typically delicious.
The thing about that recipe and the use of hummus is it's going to take the place of when you would normally add mayo or something that maybe is a little bit more calorie heavy.
Well, so the difference between hummus and mayo, let's just use those two, is it's the kind of fats in it, but also it has protein and it has carbs in it. So, which can be a bad thing that it has the carbs, but there's more to it. It's not an empty box food is what I call it.
Hummus isn't.
Hummus is not an empty.
Yeah, so, agreed. Yeah.
So an empty box food is something that you eat that just basically doesn't have any nutrition. Mm-hmm. And then you have your big box, hearty stuff. So
it has as much protein as lettuce. I'm sorry, I'm not going to go back there. I'm not going to dig that hole from this spring.
Nah, you know what? I don't even care. The whole point of that is everything vegetables has some kind of protein in it.
So what's the name of that recipe then?
A chickpea sandwich or a hummus sandwich. I don't know.
I'm going to go with it.
There's no name.
Well, we just named it.
We did. Because the thing is, and when you're a vegan or a vegetarian, the number one question I got was, where do you get your protein from? Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, son, I'm not out here. I'm not a bodybuilder. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's not hard. So, now I will say that beans are harder because they have more carbs in them. Yeah. So, you have to be very careful, but depends on your activity level.
Throw caution to the wind. Load up on the beans.
No, well then you got other problems. Yeah. They're good for your heart. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
So, are you going to go out right now and rip out your whole garden and start a fall garden?
No.
No.
That was me considering it, that pause, though.
Yeah. I'm going to go out there and tell you and do exactly what I told you I was going to do, but no, me either. But it will be interesting. I'm interested to see how everybody starts transitioning over into a fall garden. It's going to be really interesting to see. And the only way that we can really see that is if you send your garden pictures to Backyard Gardens TV. We will share them, but that's something that, we want them all year long. So whenever you're listening to this, I want them in the wintertime. I want to see the bare bones. I want to see it in the summer, spring, fall. I'm curious, there's something cool to be said about a tomato plant with tomatoes on it with a kale plant right next to it ready to be harvested. That's pretty cool. So.
Nah, I don't know if it's that cool. Look, I'm coming back around. I'm getting ready to get feisty here. I'm not sure if it's that cool.
Yeah, now she's like, you know what, the hell with it. I hate that.
Yeah. I was actually, again, just thinking about, I'm just going to plan for 2022 to be the biggest kale season.
Is it?
Ever.
I'm doing multiple kinds of kale.
Because it hasn't really worked out yet for me this year.
And I've been massaging my kale. Just saying.
I can dig it, man.
Yeah. I massaged it. I even massaged it on the second season of the Backyard Kitchen.
Ah, nicely done.
Yeah. Miss Gardner was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, you're going to have to call Batavia and ask her what I'm doing because this is how you do it. I'm telling you, we're making good kale. And kale, massaged kale is absolutely a great lunch addition for #BYG lunches. Yeah, well, for you. Not for me.
Because you don't have any?
I don't have kale yet. Okay. Yeah, not yet. Yeah. I got chard.
Yeah. I have to pick like the specific days because I basically have enough to like eat on 2 lunches.
Yeah. So this is a week before that starts. And
We're recording.
I was literally out there the other day looking and saying, what of my seedlings can I get out here and maybe get a harvest halfway through the month? And it was basically like chard was my only option because I have 1 chard plant and I have to share that with the bearded dragon. So his ass might have to go hungry.
Yeah. What I have is what I have. Like there's nothing. Arugula is probably the only thing that I may be able to plant now and still get towards the end of the month. So whatever is out there is out there. My chard has been pretty slow to take off this year.
Dude, my chard didn't grow at all last year, so I'm happy that I'm getting it this year. But that's what that compost does.
Yeah, there it is.
So. All right, everybody. You've heard us ramble about starting from summer to fall. So do yourself a favor. Go out. If you're not out in your garden, which you should be if you're listening to us, walk outside, grab your pruners, and just start cutting like Edward Scissorhands and ripping stuff out of the ground. And then take your seeds, stick them in your mouth, rip them off, and just throw seeds, make it rain seeds. Water it, and then follow us and share us with your friends. And until next time.
See ya.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you want to see what we're up to or just stay up to date on all the announcements regarding the show or anything gardening, then you can follow us on Instagram at Backyard Gardens TV.
We love seeing what you guys are doing, so use #BYG podcast in your posts, and we'll be sharing your gardens with the Backyard Gardens community.
And check us out on YouTube at Backyard Gardens, where we will post this show, all of our other shows, clips, and then also some gardening tips and just gardening entertainment. And you can see us at our website at backyardgardenstv.com. But that's it for today's show. So help us as we learn to grow and grow for change. And until next time, we'll catch you guys later. We'll call this one a wrap.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.